I'm just going to kick off with a quick session all about bespoke strategies. So often when we think about income and we think about action planning, we often just put income under one umbrella. But what can be quite helpful is if we have a look at individual components within an income strategy and then look to build out those individual processes. So these are just 4 that we've earmarked for the purpose of this session. But just having a think about bespoke strategies, we're going to look at nudge, look at comms, look at morale, and then finish with migration. Is everybody familiar with the concept of nudge? Nudge techniques, nudge behaviours? Yeah? Okay, just for those who aren't as familiar with it, it's basically a way of enabling or facilitating people to make the decisions that you want, whether they're making them consciously or subconsciously. So it's about getting people to make better decisions, ultimately to improve your income performance. So I'm just going to start off with a story about nudge. And it's something I did in a previous role. So earlier when you were speaking about people who are existing tenants, maybe struggling to get them to pay their rent in advance rather than in arrears. Something that I did with my direct debits, we had for about 5,000 or 6,000 direct debits set up at the time. And we used to have an automated way of calculating direct debits. And what it would do, it would ensure that the balance was clear by year end. So a fairly standardised approach to direct debit setting. If the rent goes up or if the welfare benefit changes, the direct debit automatically adjusts. So what I wanted to do, rather than people clearing the balance by year end, I wanted people to be a week in advance. So one of the things that I did, I changed the system on how it calculated direct debits. So rather than direct debits calculating the balance to be clear by year end, I recalculated it so that they would all be 1 week in advance by year end. That one tweak of a system generated 500 grand extra cash just through direct debit payers in 1 year. And the reason this comes under nudge techniques is because basically I told all the tenants that had a direct debit that this would be happening this year. So I put it in the rent increase letter and I put it in the direct debit guarantee mandate that this year the direct debit will calculate so that you're a week in advance by year end rather than just clear by year end, because this is what you should be doing as per your tenancy agreement. So it worked out maybe an extra £1.20 a week for people on what it would normally have been. So say we had about 5,000 people. One of the things I said is that you can opt out of this rather than opt in. So if you don't like it, ring me up and I'll change it. How many people out of 5,000 rang in and amended the direct debit? They weren't happy with what I'd done. Under 50? 1? 4 out of 5,000. So I had an extra 4,996 tenants paying a week in advance than was happening previously. It made no sense for you to, as an organisation, have a push on people paying rent in advance only if your direct debit system lets you down and then reverts back to just clearing a balance by year end. So if you have a push at the start of new tenants for people to pay a week in advance, and it's something that you do through your officer and your tenant engagements, make sure the direct debit is working so that they're a week in advance rather than clear. That one simple nudge generated 500 grand extra cash just across direct debit payers. So have a think about your own direct debit systems and if it's working in this way. And some more things that we introduced with online payments, rather than you log on to make a payment and you input the number that you want to pay, automatically populate the full balance. And the tenant would have to make a conscious effort to pay anything other than the full amount that's outstanding. As soon as they'd make that payment, pop-up box, click here to set up a direct debit. Rather than relying on people to make these decisions, what you're trying to do is guide them. to pay the full amount, guide them to pay by direct debit, guide them to pay a week in advance. And ultimately, I always think of it as like an Amazon journey. It's like a one-click journey. Click once to pay full balance, click once to set up a direct debit. You make it really easy for the tenant, but you make it really beneficial for your organisation and the amount of money that you collect. And just thinking about picking out a few more, one of the things you might want to have a think about all the places where you've got arrears in your comms or in your letters and replace it with the word debt. It's a subtle change, but it makes a difference as to how people react when they receive correspondence from you and how serious they take it. Because some people, I think, with arrears, it makes it sound less important, whereas if you're using the word debt, people react quite differently towards it. So have a think about that in terms of not just your letters, but also think about how officers speak to tenants. Are they using the word arrears or are they using the word debt? So just thinking about a comms strategy then. So something that I'd always recommend is that you work closely with your comms team and you plan out what the next 12 months look like. So what does anybody do this where they've got a campaign and they know what they're going to do for the next 12 months? Is it already agreed in advance? Yep. What kind of things do you have in your campaigns?
That like obviously the increase.
Increase, yeah.
If there's anything like we always have a draft pension across the table, holiday time, different times of the year. Summer campaign, Christmas campaign. We've got something on the 53-week year this year.
Yeah.
We're putting reminders out about updating your UC journal. So we just look at the months and what's coming up, and then we put the plan together. But with comms help us put the plan together. And then each year we'll look at what we had last year, change it or build upon it. But once you've got the basis of it, it's quite easy then. Each year just to keep amending it.
Exactly. It's so true. You do a little bit of work up front and then it's done for the next 12 months and it's just a case of tweaking it.
Then we put it in the calendar so the data team know.
Yeah.
There's this is the when we need the data, this is when it's going out.
Yeah.
And the customer service team know as well.
Yeah. It's so important, and I love that you've got a different idea for each month or each season.
Each season there's something that links to what we know is, what we need to send out to customers or what they need to be doing.
And I like the balance as well. So rather than it just being about rent, there's also a lot of opportunities to raise awareness about unclaimed benefits. Yeah. So £19 billion a year goes unclaimed in means tested benefits. A lot of people like to self-serve, and they'll never actually come to you because they can be quite proud payers. But think about all the people that you're not reaching, that you're just interacting with on a transactional basis. There's lots of things that you can do to help those quiet majority, because they might just be struggling in the background. Whereas when you start doing campaigns, you might want to have one that's something headline grabbing. £19 billion a year unclaimed. Is this you? 1 in 10 households missing out. Could this be you? Millions of pensioners miss out on pension credit. Click here. There's lots of things that you can do that's going to be really important in terms of supporting tenants and also reminding them about the rent. And that balance is really important. And I've seen some people have campaigns about treating staff with respect, because I'm hearing more and more about aggression towards staff. And it's important just to remind tenants, they are people, they're trying to help, they're not here to be abused, they shouldn't have to face this when coming into work. So it's important that you have those timely reminders at least once a quarter. So I saw it in the news last week about attacks on shopkeepers, people working in retail, up something like 300%. And I think it's getting harder and harder for housing teams as well. So think about embedding that. But yeah, just have a think about what the next 12 months look like. You can do it between now and April. Work with your comms partner. You just give them the ideas, and they're like an extra member of your team. It's like an untapped resource that often gets missed. But it's important that obviously you make the most of everybody under the roof of the organisation. And just think about your wider comms as well. Are you using QR codes? Are you giving people the ability to self-serve? Do you make the most of the email signatures? Is there any automated messaging that you can use? So don't just think about what is it that your team can do. Think about how you equip people with the ability to self-serve. Because what you often find is when correspondence goes out or comms plans are made, you have a massive spike in the visits to your website. So if you're driving traffic to the website and you're allowing people to self-serve, all those things we spoke about in the last slide about the nudge, make sure that people have the ability to self-serve very easily. You're getting obviously the payments, the direct debits, and they're getting the support as well. So Mark spoke about a directory of support. How visible is that on your website? How easy is it to use? Can you self-refer? So have a think about all those things. Team morale, we've spoken about this a lot, so I'm not going to go over it in more detail, but these are just some ideas. And I like this one. Thank God it's Monday. Yeah. How depressing can it be when you come into work on a Monday? You might still be a bit hungover. You might have had a bad weekend. You're not really looking forward to work. Rather than it being, a bit of a bad start to the week, how can you flip it round and how can you get motivated people? Monday, 9 o'clock, completely changes the complex of the day if you get people fired up from day one. If you, like me, maybe it takes you up until about 12:30, 1 o'clock on a Monday before you've actually come round and you've lost half the day already. Something like this would have been really helpful for me to get me pumped up. But yeah, have a think about it. Those 15-minute stand-up huddles, 9 o'clock or 9:30 on a Monday, it's pacey, it's positive, and it gets people in the right direction.
Just underreact, like the positivity. Some people react to it really good, and some people are just like, stop now, Lisa, it's too early. Do you know, like, I'm just like, I woke up today, how amazing is that? And they're like, oh my God, what time did you get out of bed? It's too early for this.
It's just something different. But if you can get the most out of people every hour of each day, obviously your performance will improve, but the morale improve. And those are often in tandem as well. So the happier the team, the more productive they are. We call it feel-good productivity. It makes a big difference. And then just the last one. UC migration is obviously going to be a big problem this year and maybe next year as well, especially when the ESA tenants come over, which might be 27, 28 or 28, 29. But just have a think about how you're going to approach the topic of UC migration. Early stats from the Pathfinders and the initial people moving over, 1 out of every 4 have missed the deadline. So get ready.
I think it's 8 in every 10 people are waiting until the 11th week as well to move over.
I know, it's because they want that weekly money, don't they?
Yeah.
So it does make sense why they're holding on to that weekly tax credits, aren't they, until they claim.
And some households aren't migrating over because it's too complex for them.
Yeah.
But also for some families that are working, they think they're not going to be entitled to anything because they're working. But actually, as Nick said, £19 billion goes unclaimed in benefits.
Yeah.
But it's quite sad to think people are going to miss out.
Yeah. You think about it, the state benefits went up by 10.1% last year, and it'll be 6.7% this year. It's always linked to September CPI. That's a 17% increase in applicable amounts and elements. So you've got a far bigger umbrella of people who are going to qualify this year than they ever have. So where people have just missed out in the past, they may now just qualify. And we all know that you only need £5–10 a month from UC, and it passports things like free prescriptions, free dental costs, things like that. So I'd be having a sustained campaign all about raising awareness on benefits and maximising income. And your UC migration doesn't just have to be like a defensive strategy. It can be how do we maximise income for people, not just, oh no, this is happening to us. Flip it round. But these are just some things that we'd consider. So the stakeholders, who's going to be involved, who needs to be involved. Think about that comm strategy. Could you embed it with what we've just discussed? Data is going to be really important, but best practice, just the basics. Can you think about building credits now to soften the blow when people move over? How flexible are your DDs and RCPs? And are they set up for people to be in advance, or is it for people to clear the balance? And then have a think about how you're going to navigate those conversations. And what I've seen other people do is not call it a 53 week, but call it a 53 Monday financial year. And I'll tell you the difference. If you say a 53 week, a tenant will Google it and it will say there's no such thing. Whereas if it's the 53 Monday, it will validate what you're saying. So it prevents inbound traffic. Yeah. So think about the terminology. Yeah. And some people have included like a little calendar in the rent increase letters just to say, these are your 53 Mondays. And then education. I work a lot with teams and I'll say, how's your universal credit knowledge? And I'll say, oh, it's good, it's been around a long time, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10. I'll start doing a session with them. I ask what I think are basic questions and they can't answer any. I'm always amazed at how much people overestimate their own knowledge and sometimes we stop learning. But there's a lot to learn about universal credit and migration. So really, I'd be thinking about who needs to be educated and to what level in order to deal with migration.